Hello Flosstube and welcome to another video. I am Ros Clark. This is Ros Clark Craft here on YouTube. You can also find me as Ros Clark Craft on Instagram, on Etsy, and I have a Facebook group. So do come and say hello in one of those places. You definitely get much more regular updates from me on Instagram and to some extent on Facebook. I haven't added anything to the Etsy shop for ages, although I will be doing soon. Watch this space. So it's very exciting. Nice to see you back. I can't remember when I last filmed. I was putting myself together. I was like, I literally can't remember whether I've showed you some of these things or not. I have definitely some new finishes. One new fully finish. Some things to show you and some other crafts. So, well, let's get going and see where we end up. So I'm going to start with my fully finished. I am not thrilled with this fully finished, but it is done and I have had it up, and it is this. So you've seen definitely the finish of this before. This was the most recent Historical Sampler Company Stitch Along, Happiness is Homemade. If you're interested in seeing what it should really look like, in my previous video I did a comparison between mine and the actual charted design. The most obvious difference is this text here. I didn't change the word, but I changed the lettering, and then I made some sort of assorted changes around that, and I added quite a lot more of these little white flowers. There were some very dull looking butterflies that I decided to change, and I added some. Anyway, I went through all of that last time, and I'd always had it in mind that it was going to hang up on this door here. So during spring, I have a welcome spring that hangs up there. That's a tiny modernist design that I finished a couple of years ago. And so I wanted something for other seasons. And obviously this doesn't say summer, but it is summery with the strawberries and the flowers and the colours and so on. I'm like, that would be a really nice thing to hang up there. And I had in mind how I wanted to finish it and then couldn't find the thing I wanted. So you know how like 4 or 5 years ago, shops were full of little sort of distressed wood hanging plaques that probably said things like live, laugh, love, or in this house, you know, we eat bananas or whatever. And I thought, surely if I go around all the charity shops, somebody must be getting rid of one of those. Couldn't find any in the new shops because they're sort of out of fashion. Surely there'll be one in a charity shop. Couldn't find one in a charity shop either. I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I did find one or two online, but they were really expensive and they weren't quite what I wanted, or they weren't the right size. So in the end, this is just a piece of mount board. I've still got a little bit of a stash of mount board that came free from a picture framer, you know, so it's sort of cut out of the middle of a mount essentially. I am running out of that, and I might need to go and find a picture framer and see if they'd like to give me a stash of that. They're great for cutting down for smaller pieces, obviously. And this was quite a big bit that had come, so that was nice. So I've covered that in this pink linen. I know exactly where this came from. This was a leftover from a Stacey Solomon for Asda tablecloth that I'd cut down and made into napkins a year or so ago, and I had a bit left over. And there was a bit of it that I knew was stained, and so I'm like, I'll be really careful and make sure that's hidden. Anyway, it was not quite as hidden as I planned. There's a little bit here, but it's not very visible. So I'm not too worried about that. So that's that. And then the actual stitch piece, that is foam board with batting over it. And then I think the whole thing is taped down. I knew I was doing a little bit of a quick and dirty finish. And my main principle, if you're doing something that you know is not a great finish, make it very easy to undo. So if at some point, you know, I find a better backing or I decide I just need to do a better job on this, it will be very easy to take this off. There is no glue on the stitched piece. There is glue on the back of the foam board, sticking it to the linen piece, but it is not on the stitching fabric. So those were just covered, glued together, and then I found a pom-pom trim and glued that around. As you can see, it's not very well glued around. And the much better thing to do, I just tell you, don't do what I did, would have been to glue the pom-pom trim to this piece before then gluing the whole thing onto the back. As it turned out, I didn't do that, and so then I'm trying to shove the pom-poms in, and they're not very even, and they're a bit all over the place. And also, you will notice this is not very well centered. This margin is much bigger than that margin, and this is not brilliantly well centered either. I found this ribbon, which actually goes really nicely with the design, and I had thought, is there some way of using that as a trim? And I couldn't really think, but I now have it as the hanging loop, and I don't mind that. So it is a bit quick and dirty. It's a bit wonky, but also happiness is homemade, and it is very definitely homemade. So, you know, done is better than perfect. I did want to get it hanging up this summer, so it will be, and it may or may not get some improvement at a later date. So that's my fully finish. Pleased to have that done. Now, other start and finish. I've been back on my Mill Hill kick. Surely not, you say. Surely not. How can there be more Mill Hill kits? Well, here's one. Let's just do that. This is Snail. I can't remember if it's got another name to it. But anyway, this is a snail. The snail is supposed to have a little heart charm in the middle, but I just didn't think it needed it. Oh no, it's got a little flower charm. The heart charm is supposed to be on the other one that I'll show you. I did put the charm on this. Okay, good. I will tell you that particularly around the snail shell, very few of those stitches are in the place they're supposed to be. Very few of them. I mean, there might be one or two by chance. I don't care. I don't care. I mean, it looks like a snail. It's fine. You know, the colours are more or less in the right sort of place. I think, yeah, one of the things that I'm not sure about is, so the sort of darker green outline, I don't know if you can see this, the darker green outline is a sort of flat matte bead, and then at the bottom of the snail's body there's a sort of shiny paler green bead, and obviously that's to indicate the slime, and I don't mind that, but I would have quite liked it if this bead had been nearer in colour to that bead. I think having it shiny is great, but it's sort of, I think the whole thing looks slightly unfinished, because from a distance you don't really see that pale green bead. It sort of blends into, the perforated paper is a kind of yellowy shade, and that paler green at the bottom kind of blends into it a little bit if you've not got the light on it. So anyway, but it was fun. I enjoyed stitching it very much. I really like the sort of side eye that he's giving. I think that's quite fun. Yeah, they're all fun. The other one that I've stitched since I last saw you, I think, is Sardines. I was slightly jealous of everyone who had the Cotton and Twine subscription for whatever month it was that had the sardine charm and the sardine chocolates. I'm like, I want some sardines. So anyway, I stitched this, and now I have sardines, and mine will last as long as yours. There's a little bit of thing here that I just need to snip off the end of that. It's the cry neck. I really enjoyed stitching this one. It was super, super fun. And this is more or less, I think, everything in the right place, except that there was a charm which I think maybe went on the front of the boat. I can't quite now remember, but I remember thinking it looks just too big and out of place, and I don't think it needs a charm. I really like the way they've done the actual fish and the little mouths on the fish, and the tin is fun. Let me just show you so you can see. You know, it's got the kind of turning key on the tin, and beads all the way around to give you that sort of shininess. I think it works really, really well. I really like how they've done the lettering with a combination of cross stitch and back stitch, and there's also this kind of line of shiny across the wave here. Yeah, super fun. Now, as you may know, if you've been here before, I now have a little collection of Mill Hill kits. The first one I did was the tomato pincushion, and I had a particular purpose for that, which is all still slightly on hold, but I'm doing a sewing themed kind of patchwork display thing, and that was for that. But I now have Snail, Chickadee, one of the butterflies. I want to do another butterfly. These flowers, and the sardines. I've also got kits for milk churn, which I don't think I ordered, and I think I got sent it instead of something else, and I can't really remember what that was, but I quite liked it, so I'm like, oh, do you know, I'll just keep it. So I've got milk churn. It's sort of milk churn with flowers in. It's a little bit like this, but with the milk churn. And I finally managed to get my hands on jeweled pear, which I've been after for a while. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I really like that one. And I was like, I'm not quite sure what to do with them. So I watched one of Deborah at Kensington Creates videos, and she had a little display of Mill Hills. And I think it was like a sort of maybe folding, like wooden thing with 3 panels, and you could put a magnet on each and then sort of swap your Mill Hills in and out. So I've been looking for something like that. And again, in all the shops and in all the charity shops. And what I found was this. Now, this is quite hefty. It is a plank of wood with 4 ceramic tiles on it, and they're pretty hefty. And I have painted them because they came with really quite pretty designs on them, but also the word wish in really big dark letters, and I didn't want that because that was obviously going to detract from it. So I've currently just painted them over in white, and I will paint them, I think probably a sort of lime green colour, like really quite a pale lime green. So almost, you can't really see it on here, maybe like the background colour of this perforated paper, something like that. And then I think probably what I will do is put the magnets on here and then the washers on here, so that these, when they're in storage, are not all sticking to each other. And then I can just swap them in and out as I feel like it, and they all fit really well within that sort of size of square. So I was quite pleased with that. It's not quite what I've been looking for, but I think it's going to work really nicely. So I just need to do the other layer of painting and then put some magnets on it. And I think that'll be a really nice display. It'll go really nicely. I have wide lintels above the doors that I often have things on, and I think it will sit really nicely on one of those. So I'm very pleased with that. And it means I can carry on making as many Mill Hill ornaments as I like and enjoy, you know, changing them in and out as I see fit. I was just thinking before I started to film, actually, I need to, it feels like it's time to do a little rehang of my gallery wall. You can't quite see it, but just here, there is a piece that says spring, and it's not really spring anymore, it is summer. I do have the summer piece that would go in place of that, so I'd like to get that out. And just one of the things I really enjoy is doing that kind of rehang of my pieces. I have a very small house. A lot of the walls in my house are sloping or have quite wide doors and windows. It's a converted shed, and you have to keep the openings at the same width they were, so they're quite big. And because it's small, a lot of the wall space is also taken up with furniture, so there just isn't a whole lot of space to hang everything. And at one level that's a bit frustrating, because there's stuff that I would just really like to have hanging more. But also I genuinely enjoy the process of getting out all my pieces, seeing what I've got that's new, whether that goes really well with something I've had before, whether there's something that I haven't had on display for a while, and finding new combinations of things together. Like this spring, I put these 3 circle pieces together, and I really like that combination of the birds and the butterflies and the little sort of rabbit and bees there. And I think it gives a really cute display. I won't necessarily put those 3 out together again in that way for a long time, but that's okay. I will have other things. I've got a really nice Emma Congdon piece, Here Comes the Sun, and I like to have that out in the summer, so maybe that will go in one of those spaces. Yeah, so I just really encourage you to do that. You may not need to do it in the way that I definitely need to do it, but it's fun to do. So even if you've got enough space to have everything out all the time, just every so often just take a look and think, actually, would there be a different combination that would be fun? Are there pieces that have something in common? Maybe they have a colour scheme in common, or maybe they have a motif in common. They're all the butterfly pieces or the bird pieces. Maybe you have word-based pieces that make a fun little display, and just really enjoy playing with it. Obviously you don't want to be hanging, you know, banging holes in your wall every time. So, you know, where I've got holes, I try and reuse them, and I have some displays where things are just sort of leaning against the wall so they can come in and out very easily. But do what you like. I mean, you know, if the worst comes to worst, you can always fill holes and paint over them and start again. And this wall, I've definitely done that multiple times. It's okay. It's okay. You know, and sometimes I'm putting in a new hole, and, you know, if I need something lower down, well, you can see I've already got 2 holes here. I don't know if you can see, but I have got 2 holes there. But, you know, it's fine. If I wanted to put a hole there, that's a problem. But if I wanted to put something there, that's okay. That's okay. Anyway, I now can't rehang that because the nail came out. So I have to rehang my wall anyway. Good, that was a tangent. Right, what else? Okay, the other thing I've been stitching, I've not done very much on a Saviour's Praise, and I really need to get back to it because, you know, time is ticking. I think I did so well in my 10,000 stitches in April that I then got a little bit complacent. I didn't do any in May. I do need to get back to it very soon. But I have been working on my stitch quilt pieces. I can't quite remember. I might have showed you last time. R is for rainbow. I definitely showed you Q is for quilt. But anyway, R is for rainbow. S. I really struggled with S for a long time. I wanted to do S is for stars because I've always found stars really difficult to design. I thought, right, I'm going to give myself a challenge. How hard can it be? Yeah, really hard, it turns out. And I still wasn't happy with it. Anyway, the day before S was due to come out, I'm like, I'm not doing the stars. They look awful. So we have S is for swan. I'm really pleased with that. It probably would work better even on slightly darker fabric than I've used. Mine is an off-white, but I like my swan a lot. So I was quite pleased with that. S is for swan. T, coming out today, hopefully, I assume, if the video gets uploaded when I think it is. T is for tea. Of course it is. Of course it is. This was a really fun one to design. I really enjoyed that, designing that and stitching that. T is for tea. Yeah, it is in my life. And then I just finished stitching this one yesterday. This is U is for umbrella. Umbrella, Ella, Ella. You definitely don't have to do this one in rainbow colours if you're not me. You know, if you did it in 2 colours and striped, that would look super pretty. I probably wouldn't do it in 1 colour, but you don't have to follow my... I mean, I just think all the colours is always better, but you don't have to be that person. And you could definitely stitch the word umbrella all in 1 colour, and that would be fine. I have slightly changed the design since I stitched this one so that this top edge follows the curve a bit better, so yours will look better than this one. So that's U as umbrella. I finished designing V, W, X, Y, and I've sort of finished Z. I know what it is and it's kind of there, but it needs a little bit more work. I'm hoping to get them all stitched up in the next couple of weeks so that then they're done and the patterns are done and then they will just go out. I think it looks like the final one should be coming out the last week in August. And I will just remind you that if you want to download them while they're still free, you do need to do that before the end of the stitch along. The last one will come out and then there'll be a week or so. Obviously not everyone will get to it the instant it appears, but certainly don't plan to leave it until you get to when you're ready to stitch them, because I will be taking them down and packaging them up and making it a for sale item in my Etsy shop. And I think it is going to be 1 item, so it won't be cheap because it will be all 26 charts, but I think that makes more sense. I am not listing 26 individual charts for these, and putting them in groups doesn't seem to really make sense to me because, you know, inevitably you're going to need 1 letter from each group. So I just think I'm going to do it all as 1 set. But I've really enjoyed designing them, and I do think there's potential for other stitch quilt series. I might try and do a Christmas stitch quilt series. I might do numbers because people might want to include those in the same thing. And obviously those will be much smaller groups. You know, it'll be 10 numbers. I might do 12 Christmas ones. That seems like a good Christmassy sort of number. You know, and there might be others. I might do a floral series, whatever. But none of the other groups will have 26 charts in them. They will have a more manageable kind of number and be a more reasonable price. But I just thought actually, you know, it's not been an insignificant amount of work doing 26 charts, 26 stitches. I know I'm behind on where I wanted to be with finishing tutorials. I'm going to see if I can get one done this weekend. I've got quite a quick one that I think I should be able to get done this weekend. I think I might have promised it for last weekend, so, you know, don't hold your breath. But yeah, but there will be more finishing tutorials. Basically, once I finished A Saviour's Praise, there will be a lot more of everything. But those tutorials will be relevant not only to this original Stitch Quilt series, but obviously any of the Stitch Quilt series that are to come. You can finish them in the same ways. I will put a link below. I came across a YouTube channel that I'd not seen before earlier this week called Marion's World. I really like Marion's World. I'd like to live in Marion's World. Marion is from the Northeast and she paints and stitches and does all sorts of things. She does dressmaking and but anyway, she has made a table runner out of Quilt As You Go hexagons. Hers are not cross stitch. What she likes to do is buy old table linens and bed linens and that kind of thing with pretty bits of embroidery and lace and so on, and then use, or sometimes just nice fabric with a pretty print on it, and use those as the basis for her Stitch Quilt hexagons. But I will link below because she has a really nice tutorial on stitching up your hexagon, joining them together. She's also done one set which she's done as a really nice table runner and edged it with some needle lace if you wanted to try that. I will not be doing a tutorial for I can do needle lace. I will not be doing a tutorial for needle lace, but I'll put that below because just again, it gives you different ideas of what you might want to do. You know, if you've got 26 finished stitched hexagons, and obviously you can supplement them with as many fabric-based hexagons as you like. There are all sorts of things that you can then do with them. So it's just nice to see different inspiration, not just mine. But watching it did make me think, do you know what, it's a long time since I've actually finished any of my hexagons with the backing, and I should just get on and do it because it's really, they don't take long, and then once they're done you can kind of do anything from there. So that's where I'm at with Stitch Quilt. That's, I think, all the stitching I have to show you, but I do have a couple of other things. This is my latest Swanbay fabric, subscription fabric. This comes every couple of months. I get 18 count Ada. This is in the colour Box Hill. So it's quite a, and for me, it's quite a dark brownish. It's not that dark, but it is kind of at the brownish end of beige. I mean, they're all sort of a bit beige. And she does design fabric specifically for the sort of sampler stitcher in mind, which I am not. And one of the reasons I signed up was because I know I do need more neutral fabrics in my stash. You can't stitch everything on a hot pink background. You can, but I don't always want to. So anyway, a couple of Stitch Quilt pieces are going to go on this, and then I don't know what else I will do with it, but it's a nice thing to have in stash. And I'm really glad I went for the 18 count Ada. I love stitching on Ada. I like 18 count is my favourite to stitch on. I just think it gives a really nice look. It's the right size for Stitch Quilt, which they're designed, if you remember, for 36 count linen, 18 count Ada. You can definitely do it on a higher count. If you do it on a lower count, they might not fit on the right size hexagon. You can do different size hexagons if you want, but that is up to you to do the maths for that. So that's nice. I can't remember how much I pay, but it's pretty reasonable, and it's only every other month, so it doesn't feel like you're building up an enormous stash of fabric that you are never going to kind of get on top of. It's not adding masses, you know, 6 pieces in a year. It's not adding enormous of quantities of fabric that I'm not using. So Swanbay fabrics. Now, the other sort of stitching related haul I want to show you, I did do an unboxing of this, and then the video was such bad quality for, I don't know quite why, but anyway, it was, and I'm like, I can't put that out. So we're going to try again today, where it's a sunny day, and hopefully there's enough light. Crucially, my lights are not flashing in a way that might give people epilepsy. So, remember that? They always used to warn for that. You don't see those warnings nearly so much these days. I hope people with epilepsy are not being, killed all over the place. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to this. So this, a number of videos ago, when I was in my Mill Hill kit, I was really enjoying that sort of beading and stitching and wanted to do something. Was there anything that wasn't a Mill Hill ornament? I know there are bigger Mill Hill kits, so I tend not to love the designs of those very much. That had this kind of thing, and I sort of come to the conclusion that really what I was talking about was a chatelaine. And I do own one chatelaine chart. It's a small one, and even that I'm slightly intimidated by, so I'm not sure that's really one. Anyway, then I happened to see on Instagram from Natalia, Crafting with Natalia. Natalia, I really love you to do a YouTube sometime, please. Thank you. But anyway, she was stitching on something. I'm like, that looks interesting. And I asked her about it, and she gave me a link. And I bought 2 kits, but I genuinely have lost one. It'll be somewhere. But anyway, they're very similar. They're just a slightly different design. So this is the kit. So the company is called I Make, and I will put a link in the description below to where you can buy these. I think they probably are made in China, but you don't order them from China. They do come, I think, from a UK address. It's a little weird since I did that, and I think I checked that, but I can't now absolutely confirm that's true. Anyway, but I'm pretty sure they're made in China. Certainly the instructions have all the signals of being translated into English by someone who doesn't really speak English. It's okay. It's definitely manageable. Now, it's quite a complicated thing. I'm going to take you through what comes in the kit and how it works. I do not think these charts are for everyone, and I will explain why as I go. Not necessarily to do with being a beginner stitcher or an advanced stitcher. It's about the way that the instructions are put together that I think some people will find really straightforward and easy to follow, and other people I think will find really challenging to follow. So anyway, this one is called Iris Veil, and it is from their garden series. And in this little leaflet that comes with it, they show you others from that. So you can see they're all quite similar. The finished size is 10.5 by 10.5 centimeters, 58 by 58 stitches. You're stitching it on 28 count canvas, and you get included a piece of canvas that is 20 by 20. So they're not huge. And that's one of the things that appealed to me about them. You can see they have a sort of similar aesthetic to some of the chatelaine pieces. They're not, as far as I know, I don't think they're copied in any way. Please tell me if you think I'm wrong about that. But they have a very similar aesthetic, I think. And I think they're very pretty. So what do you get in your kit? Like I say, you get a piece of fabric. We've got a list on the front, so I'm just telling you what you get. You get embroidery threads, 16 types of embroidery thread, embroidery beads, 25 types of bead, needles. You get a 26 count and 28 count and a beading needle. You get 1 spool of beading thread and a pattern sheet. It says this is level 1. I don't know how many levels there are. Yeah, like I say, I don't think this is super easy. It says it is minimalist, fun and artistic, rich in colour, with various embroidery thread materials, bead and gem elements. I Make Stitch. So, there is a warm reminder. See what I mean about translated not from English. It says the linen that you get is Zweigart linen, so that's nice. The warm reminder, after cutting the fabric to prevent fraying, you may wrap both sides of the edges with masking tape. I will not be doing that. Do you know, I don't really find fraying is that much problem. If you really find it's a problem, you can always overlock it or zigzag stitch it or whatever. But I probably won't do either of those things. I definitely won't be using the masking tape. And then there are some instructions about how you match the patterns in the thread manual with the special stitch embroidery pattern, the numbers, the thread usage, the symbol chart, how you sew in beads. It suggests drawing grid lines on the holes rather than on the warp, but it's interesting, for 28 count / 16 count fabric, those two things are not the same. Anyway, we only have one kind of fabric, so we're not worrying about that. Do not double the thread when stitching. Use the number of strands specified. It talks about different strands in it, and there are some little diagrams about how you split the threads. Some of it's stranded cotton and some of it isn't, but even some of the non-stranded cotton you might need to split. Okay, then we have the examples of other ones that I showed you. Some instructions for if you want to make it into a pin cushion. I say instructions, I say those instructions are pretty minimal. And then we get onto something which makes no sense at all until you've looked at some of the other pieces. So we'll leave that for the moment. Let me show you, what have we got here? Let's find the symbol chart next. Okay, we do have how you get in touch with them, QR code. Tutorial videos. You can get, if you want, you can get digital images and a digital file. I don't use Saga. I don't know whether the Saga file is compatible with anything else. What I am going to say is it may not be that helpful to you. If what you like to do is use your pattern keeper or markup to sort of mark stitches done, because there are so many specialty stitches, it's not that helpful for that. But you may still want to have it on a screen rather than on paper, and you can contact them for that. Right, thread list. We're going to go through this. We get a card. Okay, so fairly standard card. And on the card, let's hold it that way so you can read it. You can see they are all numbered. They've all got a colour in a box, and some of them have got a symbol in a box. Okay, so the number helps you to correlate with this chart. So number 1 on here is number 1 here, and it's got the symbol and the colour as well, but you're not trying to match and say, oh, is this that green or that green? You've got a number and sometimes a symbol. I'll explain why you only sometimes get a symbol in a bit. So we've got some lovely threads here. The first half a dozen are all silk, as you can see. They come, most of them, in a 6-stranded thread, although number 1 is a 12-stranded thread, and then it tells you what you're going to use. Some of them you're going to use 2 strands once they've been pulled out, and some of them you're going to use 3 strands. So you're going to need to refer to this for how you're using those threads. Number 7, which is this sort of mauvey colour. Let me show you number 7. I've sort of braided mine together to hold them in place, but this is number 7. This is a protein synthetic fibre. I don't know, but I guess something like a rayon or a viscose. Do you get viscose embroidery threads? I'm not sure. Anyway, that comes in 4 strands and you're going to use 2. Number 8, which is this one, slightly paler colour. That is 100% mercerized cotton, 7 strands, and you're going to use 2. So that is very much your normal standard cotton embroidery floss. Then we have got variegated threads. Some of these are more highly variegated than others, but they are all at least slightly variegated. So number 9, this is an Egyptian cotton, and this is not really a stranded thread. It says there are 2 strands, and we're going to separate it in 2, but it is really a plied thread rather than a stranded thread, and it's got a subtle variegation on it in those sort of pinks and lavenders. It's very pretty. We've got a tiny amount of another silk. This is a silk thread which comes in 3 by 3 strands, so 3 strands each of which are 3-ply, and we're going to use 1 strand. It is not yet clear to me whether we're using one of the 3 or one of the 9. I think it might be one of the 3, but I'm not sure. Okay. What was that? Number 10. Number 11, we're on to the bottom. You can see this one is much more variegated. Again, in very pretty floral colours, this one at the bottom. That is 50% silk, 50% cotton, 6 strands, and we're going to use 3 of them. And then finally, we've got another mulberry silk in this sort of paler green, and that is a 5-strand thread, of which we're going to use 2. So you can see there is not a lot of consistency. Each different thread has its own set thing. We're not sometimes using 1 strand of it and sometimes using 2, but they're not all the same. They're not the same kind of thread, and they're not used in the same ways. So you've got to pay attention to your threads and your thread card. That's not all the threads. There are 4 more specialty threads which come in these little bags. And these are all, I think they're all the same, metallic synthetic. Yeah, they are 2 or 3 stranded threads, and we're using 1 strand or 3 strands. Okay, let's find number 13. Oh yes, now with these, I must admit they slightly let themselves out. So let me show you them, and then I'll explain how they've slightly let themselves out. I'm not going to take them out of the bags. They are shiny metallic. Like I said, they are all synthetic. You can't really see the sparkle through the bags, but they definitely are sparkling to me. They do not have their number written on them. I would have liked these to say 13, 14, 15 and 16, but they do not. However, all is not lost. We're not trying to guess from the colours, because the colours on these are not entirely clear to me which one is which. It is these 4, the bottom one there and the top 3 there, and you can definitely see this one, I think, is that sort of orangey one, but the other 3 are various shades of kind of greyy beigey colour, and I don't think it's at all clear which would be which. However, we do have, I'm going to show you on this sheet, it's a bit easier, this number. Okay, and that does correspond to a number that is printed on the bag. So this one is J11 J1 #0077. So that is the bottom one, and you can see the colours are not a great match, but that number is that number, so that is definitely on it. What I do plan to do is get a Sharpie out and write 13, 14, 15 and 16 on the right ones, so that I'm not always having to check against that. So that is all our threads, and you can see it's quite a lot. They're nice quality. A lot of those are silk, some silk cotton, some synthetic. They look really nice. They're really lovely colours. I mean, even just holding these together, I think hopefully you can get a sense of, you know, they're just really pretty, sort of cottage garden colours, I feel like. So I think they're going to be lovely. So you've got those, you've got beading needles, as I mentioned, and also stitching needles, imported Zweigart fabric, pattern sheets and instruction book. The other thing we have are the beads. And once again, we have a bead list. So these, I don't quite understand the choice of things here. They are mainly numbers. 1 and 7 are enormous numbers. And then we've got 2 is in pink. Absolutely no idea why. And then we go, after 7, we go to F. And then we've got some letters and numbers going down here. Yeah, who knows? Who knows why? Anyway, there is, for each of these, there is a number that corresponds to where we find them. So the beads are numbered, I think it's 25. Yeah, 1 to 25. You've got a sort of stock code number. You've also got a specification and a description. So the size of the bead and the kind of bead. Faceted, flat, iridescent, sizes, tube bead, strawberry bead, various things. But as you can see, no colours. We're not trying to guess the beads by colour. And the beads come, I think, really nicely packaged. You get, I think 6, and I now can only currently see 5, but anyway, 6 little strips like this. and each bead is in its own little container. And some of them, I don't know how you're going to really see this, some of them have several in and some of them have not very many in, according to how you need. And you can see on the front of each container is a number and a letter. So this starts at number 17 and the symbol is H, a number and a symbol. So we look on our chart here and we see H17, okay, and that should be some little rice beads, which it is. They're very small. I would call those seed beads, and there's only half a dozen of those, sort of a nice brownish seed bead. The next one along, number 18K, those are a tube bead. That's this box here, and I don't know if you see that, but yeah, I would call it a bugle bead, but you know, it's definitely a tube bead. And so on. So they're really, really well sorted for you and really clearly labelled. As I say, there is 6 of these with 4 in, so that gives you 24. And so then there was another little container, which again, I can't put my hands on right now, but I know I have got, in fact, I can see it, just a little tube on its own with a little plastic container that's labelled. So those are all our beads, those are all our threads, and you can see it's really well kitted. We've got some instructions here. The bead mark colour blocks on the chart are relatively small. Please match the colours carefully whilst also paying attention to the size and shape of the symbols as well as the numbers. Refer to the bead chart for detailed numbering and then use a cross stitch to secure them. Then we've got this is really your tutorial for if you want to make it into a pincushion. Dumpling stitch. Yeah, I don't think there's anything called a dumpling stitch. I think that's somebody who's put the Chinese word, I'm guessing, for pincushion or small cushion or something like that into Google Translate, and it's come back with dumpling. I kind of love that though, as a name for a pincushion. So it's just giving you instructions about how you would do that. I may or may not finish mine into a dumpling. We will see. So those are all the things. Here's the fabric. It says Zweigart, and it certainly has, I think, the kind of classic Zweigart orange selvage. So I think that probably is correct. The charts. Now, here is where things get complicated. And this is where I'm going to explain. I mean, you may have already got a sense of this. I think if you are someone who finds coding and sorting challenging, this kit is not for you. And you probably have already guessed that. Dealing with 16 different thread symbols and instructions and having to cross reference them, dealing with 25 different beads and having to cross reference those. And we have not even got to the chart yet. If you're someone who's thinking that sounds like a nightmare, I think it probably is. So that is what I think. If you're someone who finds spreadsheets difficult, I think you might find this kit difficult. Yeah, you know, you make your decision for yourself, obviously. I don't think the actual stitching is going to be that hard. I do think following the instructions, and it's not that they're not good instructions, but it is complicated. And I think that is going to be quite hard. Now, I'm not going to show you obviously the chart, but I do want you to know we've got 3 sheets, 3 A4 sheets, all of which have some version of the chart. So I'm going to show you a little corner, and I'm going to show you the same corner on each of them to show you what we've got. So the first one is the diagram, the second one is the symbol chart, and the third one is the special stitch chart. So this is the diagram. So this is what you would start with your basic stitching. Let me just show you a little bit here. Okay, so you can see it looks like a cross stitch chart. The big square blocks of colour around the edge, we're going to put some beads in those. The line of colour around the outside, that is for back stitching, and they particularly recommend, obviously, if you're going to make it into a pincushion, that you do the back stitching. I think you could also make it into a really pretty biscornu. Anyway, yeah, that's just my thought. And then you will see on there are a lot round this corner here, you can see there's a specialty stitch in the middle, but then there are cross stitches, and the cross stitches are kind of drawn out as if they were specialty stitches. They're not drawn out like that on all the charts, but they are on this one. Okay, so that's how we know we've got cross stitches on there. And then all the specialty stitches are kind of drawn out line by line, and they are printed in the colours which correspond to the threads that we have got, but there are no symbols on this chart. Okay, so this chart I think is pretty useful for giving you an overlay of the whole thing. Where am I looking at a bead? Where am I looking at a stitch? But I'm going to then want to reference at least one of the other charts to check that I've got exactly the right thing. So let me then show you the same corner in the symbol chart, and I think this is probably the chart that I will use most frequently. And again, I'm just going to show you the same corner. So where we had on the first chart kind of blobs of colour, here we've got actual symbols. This is N, P, N, and so I would check those on my bead chart and make sure I get the right beads. On here, you can see instead of the crosses, we've got symbols. Now, I don't know if you remember, it's fine if you don't, it was a long time ago, when we looked at the thread chart, some of the threads had symbols and some didn't. And this is why. If you are doing cross stitch in that thread, it will have a symbol. If it is only used in a specialty stitch, it won't have a symbol, because the specialty stitches don't have symbols attached to them. But on here, I'll know that I'm looking for thread W to do cross stitch, and here I'm looking for thread Z to do cross stitch. But in the middle, I know I'm doing a specialty stitch. Good. Is there anything else I want to show you from that? I don't think so. Let's move on to the third chart, which is our specialty stitch chart. So, you know, I talked on there about the specialty stitch. It just has a sort of colour and some lines. This is the chart that you're going to use. I'm just trying to say, I think I can show you this because so much of the actual chart is covered up. Please don't steal anything from this, but I'm just going to show you this. Maybe I'll just show you a bit of it. So this is the same corner. Not the whole thing is on here because the chart is symmetrical. But what you can see on here are these big numbers, 1, 4, 11, and so on over the whole thing. And each one of those points to a particular specialty stitch. So with this stitch, we know we're going to do number 1. So then we go back to, told you, it's complicated. Then we go back to the very first leaflet we looked at, and it says, at the needle position of icon 1. Oh, that's this one. And we're told we use flower cord 7 stitch type from embroidery diagram 1 with thread, and then it gives you the thread number, 3 strands from the original 12. So from this, you can work out precisely which thread you're using. You're not having to look at this and guess, well, which thread is that pink? And I know precisely what stitch I'm doing, and I've got a detailed, large-scale diagram numbered showing me what order I do all of those stitches. And it says flower cord 7. Okay, that's stitch 1. And then we go down here. It's not well covered on the page. This instruction does not go with this diagram. And needle position of icon 2, use the blade stitch from embroidery diagram 2. That's this one. And again, it tells you which thread to use and how much to use. Icon 3, you just do back stitches that match the position in the diagram. So icon 3, it's these darker blue outlines. There isn't a stitch diagram for that, it's just do back stitch around that. Icon 4, we've got a diagram for that. Icon 5, we're just doing back stitch going around, and so on. Some of them you've got diagrams where there's a complicated stitch, and some of them it's just telling you do back stitch around as it is indicated. There are 15 different instructions for different kinds of specialty stitch. Like I say, some of those are just back stitch outlining, and some of them are not. And some of them use more than one colour of thread. That might be a variegated thread. Let me have a look at that. Yeah, no, that is just a variegated thread. Yeah, I don't think you're ever actually using more than one colour. of thread for those. So you see what I mean? I think it is challenging. I think once you get into the rhythm of it and where you have to look and which diagrams you're using for what, I think it'll be fine. I don't think any of the stitching is particularly complicated per se. It is that kind of thing, you know, there's a kind of symmetrical design, so counting is going to matter. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, but I'm quite looking forward to it. I think it will be really fun to do, and it's definitely what I was looking for, in that something between a Mill Hill and a chatelaine. And I think if you're somebody who's thinking, I might quite like to do a chatelaine, but I'm slightly intimidated by it and I don't know if I would enjoy that kind of stitching, I think this would be a really good starting point. It was not super expensive. I think it might have been £30, but I think it's a pretty full kit for £30. You know, 16 different threads, 25 different kinds of beads, Zweigart fabric, a lot of instructions. You up for it? Let me know. If I hate it, like I say, I did buy 2. And if I ever find the other one and find that I hate it, maybe I'll do a giveaway and you can try. But if you're tempted, I genuinely would encourage you to go and have a look and see if you think this might be your sort of thing, because it might be your sort of thing. There you go. And I've not seen anything else quite like it. Like I say, other than the actual chatelaines, I've not seen anything quite like this. And because it's all pre-kitted, you're not having to source all of those different kind of materials. So I think it's worth it. Good. I've got one other piece of haul, which is not really cross-stitch related, but I love it. And, you know, you could maybe use it for finishing. I don't know if you know the designer Clarissa Hulse. I know her mainly because I say quite often, when I buy bed linen, which is not very often, one of the places I like to go and look is TK Maxx or HomeSense. And in TK Maxx or HomeSense, they do quite often have Clarissa Hulse designs, and I kind of really love them. And Facebook have been advertising her to me for a while. 2 things you can get, and actually, well, 3 things, but one of which is definitely out of my price bracket, which is she now has a clothing line. It's a kind of exclusive kind of clothing line where they're like, we're only making 25 of every piece. I'm like, okay, I definitely can't afford that. They do now also have a craft fabric line, like quilting cotton. You can buy by the yard, I think, and certainly you can buy bags of, you know, amounts. But they also have, and this is what I bought, some of their, what they call their backcloth fabric that are kind of offcuts. And so I bought a bag. I think I got 16 pieces and I paid about £30, I think, for it. But look, aren't they beautiful? And she does say these will be quite difficult to hand stitch, and I think that's probably right. But if you machine stitch, I mean, they're just glorious. And you can imagine just using a little strip of this next to a piece on the front of a small, you know, some of these really are quite small pieces, but they're all kind of glorious. Some of them, this one slightly bigger. This is a little tiny one, but again, I could definitely see finding a place to use that on a small. That could be a backing for something. It's another long strip, but really, really pretty. This is quite metallic. And then we've got a slightly bigger piece again. Yeah, that one. Love this one. This one. Don't quite know what I'd use that for, but I'd find something. This is a really, really thin strip. But, you know, I'll find a place for it somewhere. I don't know. And this one. So anyway, they might not be your kind of thing, but if they are, I think they're really fun. I think they would be, so they've got that sort of, you may never have done this, but if you've ever painted into fabric, they've got that sort of feel to them. They just feel quite sturdy. So they'd be great as a backing fabric for something you want quite sturdy. I think they make really great journal covers, book covers, sketchbook covers, that kind of thing. I don't know, I'm going to have fun with them. So those. And then I just wanted to show you what I have been doing on my holidays. So in the last few weeks, I've been on 2 art holidays. I sort of, yeah, I had the first one booked, and then a friend was like, do you want to go on the other one? And I'm like, yeah, I do. So the first one was Monday to Friday, and then last week it was a long weekend, and I generally don't work Fridays anyway, so that was Friday to Sunday without taking time. The first one, I'm not going to show you the sketchbook for that because it was a great course. I mean, I've been on these before. It's a lady called Tansy Hagen who runs them. Yeah, I mean, they're just brilliant and I really love them. But what I ended up producing was just a sketchbook with quite a lot of deconstructed things in it. And I did a lot of philosophical thinking about the nature of holes, which not everyone is as interested in as me, it turns out. So anyway, as a sort of artistic piece, there's not really a lot to see. But last weekend, I do want to tell you about this. I went on a course called Concertina Sketchbooks with a lady called Karen Stamper. I'll put her links below. And I really want to encourage this to you. Both Karen and Tansy, actually, I would put, do online courses. And Karen has courses that start at like £35 for a mini course. And then there are longer ones as well. Both of them, I think, are very accessible places to start if you're someone who's never done any art, who thinks they are bad at art but wants to try, who loves just playing around with stuff. They both have a principle of don't go and buy loads of materials, you know, use what you have. One of Karen's courses that I'm quite tempted to sign up for is a new course on how you use magazines to make a sketchbook. I'm like, yeah, I'm all over that. I don't really buy magazines, but you can often pick magazines up for free in all sorts of places, you know, sort of advertising-y kind of magazines and that sort of thing, or, you know, maybe somebody's throwing some out and you're like, yes, I'll have those, thank you very much. So, you know, it's not about spending loads of money, and it's not about being a skilled figurative artist, by which I mean, can you draw something and make it look like the thing you're drawing? Really, neither of them are primarily about that at all. So with Karen's, I'm going to show you because I've got an empty one here. I have been doing some concertina sketchbooks anyway in a much smaller scale, but we had these which are A5 and they have, I don't know how many pages, but it goes on forever. And I spent quite a lot of my weekend dropping mine in precisely that way. So really big. But let me tell you the first things that she got us to do. We had to lay out like the first 6 or 8 pages across our table, something like that. Grab a pencil, face away so you can't see what you're doing, and just jab. Make lines and jab, and you're not trying to draw anything, you're just getting some marks into the page. Anyone can do that, right? We then had some bits of candle and wax crayon and did a similar kind of drawing in and making marks and doing whatever we wanted. What else do we do? We did the same with some gesso, which is a kind of really opaque white paint. So we made some strokes on that. I feel like we did something else as well at that point, but I now can't remember what it was. And then, anyway, we then got a puddle of ink, quite cheap. School ink is fine, whatever you've got around, black ink, blue black, sepia, whatever, and quite a big little pot of it. And you're not painting, you're not scribbling, you're sort of swooshing the ink across. Now, she was like, I know people do this, she's done these workshops before, people want to see it in the whatever. So she made us do some practice runs on big paper first, which, 2 seconds, these are my practice ones, and you sort of swoosh all your ink on and then you play with it. So we had straws to blow through, we had salt to put on it, you can drop water on it at different stages to get different kinds of texture. I really enjoyed the blowing it through a straw. You can kind of splat it off your brush. You lift your paper up so it trickles down. This one you can see is much darker, there's a lot more ink on there, but the same kind of techniques. That sort of star bit in the middle is a straw blown. Let me see if I can find a nice... Oh, I tell you what else I did on this one, why it's so sort of fluffy around the edges. That was spraying water from a spray bottle, and that just gave that effect. Let me find a nice salty bit. This is a nice salty bit here. So that effect is just from putting your ink, and then as it's drying you just spray. We just use normal table salt. You could use posh salt and you get a slightly more chunky effect, but it still works. And finally, oh yeah, lots of salt on this one. I was going slightly crazy with the salt on this one. So you can see, super fun. You're not trying to draw anything or paint anything. You're just playing with how does this material work. And so the first thing we did, you know, after we'd sort of done those kind of basings, we then went along all sort of 8 pages or so that we had open with ink. And then we went and had lunch and left it to dry. So you can see it's really accessible. Like, you know, there's nothing scary in that, because you're not being asked to create a particular result. You're just being told what to do, what gestures to use, what materials to use, what tools to use, and then you've created something. And we had, so it's a 3-day workshop with Karen. The first couple of days, every so often she would then be introducing a new technique. We did a lot of collage, we did some, my mind is now blank. Anyway, we did various things. She introduced different kind of materials and tools. And then from about halfway through the second day, we were more or less left on our own to kind of finish things how we wanted. And obviously she was going around and helping everyone individually, but we weren't really being directed any further at that point. We went out and did some observational drawing, and she talked about how you could either draw directly into your sketchbook, but actually if you're nervous to do that, you know, draw separately and then put it in your sketchbook. So this is my sketchbook, Peak District Flowers. A lot of people were inspired by the landscape. We were in the Peak District and there's beautiful sort of fields and hills. I was mainly inspired by the garden. So I'm going to see how much I can show you. There is a little video of this on my Instagram feed. So a lot of dry stone wall around the place. Oh, that's right. One of the things we did is we went out and just took photos with our phones around the place and got them printed out. Some of them in black and white and some of them in colour. So this is one of the photos that I've just sort of cut out and stuck in and then worked around it. And she's very big on this sort of working around. So this is painted in to extend it in this direction. I've added some little paints to kind of imitate this sort of goosegrass that's there. This is tissue paper that gives this kind of texture here, painted over. I mean, you can't really see a whole lot of my original ink. This was the original ink down here, I think. Anyway, you can't see any of it, I don't think, on this page. As you see, I got quite excited by the flowers. And this was a bit, I remember on the final day, we'd sort of put our sketchbooks up for people to go around and have a look at. And I caught sight of this from the outside room, and I just suddenly looked like, wait, I did that? Because it looks like a real painting of like real things. And I just couldn't quite believe it, because I'm not really that sort of artist normally. And yeah, I was super chuffed. And you know, a lot of it I had just done, but there were things where Karen had come and said, and particularly one of the things she said was I needed to darken the backgrounds behind the leaves and behind the flowers, and that really did make a big impact. So yeah, so let's just keep going. There were bits that we stuck on. Oh, that's right, we stuck bits of masking tape on, which sort of look vaguely like tree trunks. Then I've got a bit more stone wall, and again, some of that is photographed, some of that is drawn and stuck in, some of that is just painted directly into the thing. Yeah, I really like how that sort of goes off into the distance. She's really good at helping us think about having some kind of calmer spaces as well as bigger spaces. So this is one of my slightly calmer spaces. I'm not very good at the calm space. I don't have any white spaces. This we did. These were super fun. We had to collect various leaves, and then you just kind of put the leaf behind a bit of magazine page and rub it with sandpaper, and you get that sort of imprint. So, you know, I've not drawn that at all. And then cut it out. Then we get into my sort of first real garden phase. And that's a real mix of photographs, collage bits from magazines, painting, drawing, yeah, a whole load of stuff in different ways that I've done there to give the sort of depth of that. Bit of splatting, always my favourite painting technique. Yeah, I really like that little flower, giving some colour in the midst of the thing. There's some sort of hints at fields and hedgerows in the background. Second garden section. These are also magazine rubbings, but just on a magazine page with pink and purple on it. This sort of scribbly purple outline here, that was drawn onto some tissue paper and then collaged in, and as you can see, the tissue paper more or less disappears if you use a wet glue. So that's one way of drawing, and the same with the poppies. There are some tissue paper outlines, and then I did some collaging of the poppies around them. And we've got a little bit more. I think this was a page that really looked awful. I didn't know what to do with it, and then I was just like, I'm just going to paint over it, and that really helped. So she's very big on, if you don't like it, paint over it or stick something over it. You know, it doesn't have to be right first time. One of the things I'm proudest of is that washing line. I just think the sense of movement in the air, and you know, those are obviously not clothes pegs, but the impression they give of clothes pegs, I really like that, how that came out. I did want a slightly darker patch, and I didn't know quite what to do. Then we talked about, she's like, we're going to do some drawing, and we talked about maybe doing some large cow parsley. Couldn't find any cow parsley, but this is Queen Anne's lace, which has the same effect. I really like that. That's just drawn straight on with a black Posca pen and an off-white Posca pen, and then a little bit of watercolour to give the pink. Now this is one of my favourite bits. Where I was sitting in the studio, I had a view out of the window in the door, and I really wanted to do a whole hello. And so then I just sketched on the back the view outside of that window. So that folds through. So that was quite fun. And then we get on to the final pages and just a couple more poppies. It was a lot to do all of that in 3 days. But I really wanted to finish it because I know if I bring this sort of thing home half finished, I won't ever finish it. And it's super fun. And a lot of it you can do very big and very quickly, and then you can spend time on other parts of it, putting in more detail and more, but you know, none of this is complicated or detailed. The bits that look complicated and detailed, let me find one, generally are the bits I've cut out of magazines. Like this flower here, that is all cut out of a magazine, and then I've just splattered bits of paint over it, more or less. Yeah, I have not drawn those flowers at all. I like how in the photo they kind of blur out, and so then that makes it very natural into the background here. You know, here we've got a mix. So I did draw the foxgloves, but I didn't draw those. I did paint the gate, but all of this back here, which you now can't see, I do find these a little bit unwieldy to hold. You know, this is all stuck in, this is all stuck in. Yeah, a lot of this page is stuck in. I painted the tree. I don't really like the tree, but you know, it's fine. It can stay. I'm not doing anything else to it because it's finished. So anyway, I will put the links, Karen Stamper and also Tansy Hagen. Really, really accessible. If you want to play around with art, but you're not quite sure where to start or what to do, they will just give you some direction to start thinking about how you can do that. And if you don't like what you did at the beginning, it's fine. It is a learned skill. You wouldn't sit down at the piano and suddenly expect to be able to, you know, play a recognisable piece. You've got to do some exercises and some practice and some learning. But this is a really fun way of learning. And there were people on the course who had never picked up a paintbrush before in their lives. And there were people who mainly what they do is quilting or whatever, or they just come because their friend really wanted to do it. And they produce amazing, amazing things by the end. Things that they would not have, I mean, I didn't believe I could have done this, but absolutely things way beyond what they could believe. So sometimes we're bad artists because we've had bad teachers. And I have been very lucky for the last 8 or 9 years to have a really great art teacher that I used to go regularly to weekly classes. They have stopped in the last year, but I've also been on a number of courses online and in person, and you know, if I'm any good now, it's because I have practiced. So that's my encouragement to you if you would like to try any of that. If you'd like any other hints, tips or suggestions about where to find a great place to go and do art, hint, it won't be sip and paint. I think sip and paint sounds really fun and I would happily go and do it, but you will not learn how to paint. You will not learn how to think about art. You will have fun and you might produce something you're quite happy with, but it's not how you're going to get any better at anything. So I throw that out there. Anyway, I think that is everything I have to say. Next time I will be back, I will hope to have the final stitch quilt pieces, and I will hope to have made some significant progress on a Saviour's Praise, and I will hope that it will be another lovely sunny day. It's been nice to hang out with you all. Do let me know what you're working on, what other crafts you're trying. Have you ever had a go at painting? Did you have a terrible experience with an art teacher at school? Almost certainly the answer to that one will be yes, and that's okay. I feel like we should have a club for, you know, recovering from art at school, or, you know, something that trips off the tongue better than that. Anyway, it's been nice to see you. See you again soon.